Today I'm testing a very simple strategy from Greg Secker's Learn to Trade, and this is the Bollinger Bounce strategy, which was published on YouTube. I'll leave a link in the description that will refer back to the original video that shows this strategy, and I'll point out that in that original video there is a reference to a more detailed version of this strategy. So all I'm testing today is the basic strategy. You should watch the original video to make sure you get an accurate description of the strategy, but here are the basics. We are using a 50 period and a 100 period EMA. They are a trend filter, and the trend is upward if the 50 period EMA is above the 100 period EMA, and the trend is downward if the 50 is below the 100 period EMA. We're then looking for the price to go outside the range of the Bollinger Bands. So if we're in an uptrend, looking for the price to go below the lower Bollinger Band. And if we're in a downtrend, we're looking for the price to go above the upper Bollinger Band. When either of those happens, we trade back towards the middle. So if we're in a downtrend and the price has gone above the upper Bollinger Band, then we will open a stop order at the bottom of the candle that broke the Bollinger Band with a stop loss just above that candle and a take profit of 1-to-1 ratio. Now the strategy uses a percentage of equity risk, so I'm going to be trading these with a 2% risk when I run the tests. The strategy also indicates that you should cancel the order if the next candle closes but the order has not been triggered. But I found that a little ambiguous, so I couldn't determine if the intent of the strategy was to cancel the order as soon as the next candle has closed if the order hasn't been triggered, or only if the next candle was also a trigger candle and then simply replace the order with a new order. So I've actually built the Expert Advisor to run in both modes. Let's just go to the chart and I'll show you a couple of examples of where these trades would be executed. Now I'll show some examples before I run the tests. I have here the Aussie Kiwi chart open, 4-hour time frame. I have the Bollinger Bands in blue, the 50 period EMA in white, and the 100 period EMA in yellow. So in this particular part of the chart, what we're looking at is the 50 is above the 100, so we're in an uptrend, and we'd be looking then for the price to break below the lower Bollinger Band. And we can see that happen just here. So at this point, the price initially went below, and we're just looking for the actual price to go below. We're not necessarily looking for a close, although this candle did close below. So at the end of that candle, the strategy would have said place a buy stop order just above the top of that candle, which would have been around there. But then the next candle also closed below the Bollinger Band. So the strategy also then says at the next candle, cancel out this trade. And I would have then moved to a new trade here. That trade would have been executed at this very next candle, and would have then gone on, so I would have had a stop loss down here that would have been at 254 points and would have easily made that 254 points. So that's an example of a buy trade where we've got the 50 EMA above the 100 EMA and the price goes below the lower Bollinger Band and then comes back. If I move further on, then at this point in the chart, the 50 EMA is still above the 100 EMA, but the price crosses below the Bollinger Band here and then does that again on a lower candle here and again here. And if I had moved the trade, when I get to this point, that would have executed at the very next candle. So we can see there's an upward candle here that would have crossed that entry point. But with a stop loss down here at 272 points, the price never reached that and would have gone on to lose. And then the price kept going, and eventually we get to a point down here where it has gone below the Bollinger again. And if I had opened an order at this point, stop loss just below that candle, 283 points, then I would have easily made that 283 points. So it's not always a winning strategy. You can see at this point I would have lost. So those are three long examples, one here that failed, and another one here that would have succeeded. Let me scroll the chart backwards a little. Now here is a point on the chart where the 50 EMA is below the 100 EMA. The price has gone above the upper Bollinger. And just as before, it crossed on this candle. I've got the crosshairs there. And so I would have placed a sell stop order at that level. But then another candle did the same thing, and I would have moved the sell stop order to this level. But then yet another candle here, and I would have moved the sell stop order. And that would have been triggered on the very next candle. If you have a look at this point, you can see that just below this candle here, where I have the crosshairs now, I would have placed a sell stop order just below that. It would have been opened by this next candle. Now I can't tell from this candle whether the price went up before coming down or whether it went down before going up. So there's a possibility that the trade wouldn't have been executed until after the price had already gone above the stop loss. So I'm going to assume that it didn't, and that this trade was executed towards the end of that candle. And in that case, I would have had an entry point there with a stop loss about 295 points and easily made that 295 points here. Let's scroll backwards a little further. Here is another point, still in a downtrend. The 50 EMA is below the 100 EMA. And at this point, I have a candle that went above the upper Bollinger Band. I would have placed a stop order here, which, if I'd kept that in place, would have been executed on this candle. But the stop loss would have been here at 434, and easily the price went up to the stop loss before it went to the take profit. If I had cancelled that trade and moved to an entry point here on the next candle with a stop loss at 244 points, then I would have made that 244 points. So those are a couple of examples of trades with this strategy, but please watch the original video where the strategy is described in full and make up your own mind as to my interpretation. The one thing that I haven't followed strictly in the strategy, he mentions an option to check the angle of the trend on the 50 and the 100 EMA to make sure that they are getting steeper and further apart. I built into my test the option to look at that angle and to make sure that they are both sloping in the correct direction. So you can, as we maybe see here, the 50 EMA is sloping upwards even though it's below the 100. So I built an option to avoid any trades in that period, and also to make sure that the 50 is getting further away from the 100. But I didn't strictly check to make sure that the slope on the 50 or the 100 was continuing to increase, just that it had a downward or an upward slope and that they were getting further apart. I found when I did that that I executed very few trades. In fact, in some cases, none at all. So to make it an even tighter control, where I was looking for the angles to become even steeper, then that would have even restricted the trades more. So I haven't worried too much about implementing the strategy exactly as described there. It was an option. So I've still left that option in my expert advisor that I can set to watch the angles, but I haven't set anything up to make sure that the angles are actually increasing. And the tests that I run won't use the angles at all. So now let's get straight in and run some tests. So to run this test, I'll be using MetaTrader 5. I'm using a 4-hour chart, mainly because that was the time frame used in the original example. I'm running this on a 12-month period from 1st of January 22 to the 1st of January 23. The indicators are a 50 period EMA and a 100 period EMA used to set the trend direction. So the fast moving average, the 50 period, is above the 100 for an upward trend or below the 100 for a downward trend. The Bollinger Bands, I'm using the default settings, 20 periods and 2 deviations, and I'm not using the angle test on the 50 and 100 period EMA. Trades are triggered when a candle breaks the Bollinger Band opposite to the trend. So if the trend is a downward trend and the candle breaks the upper Bollinger Band, or if the trend is an upward trend and the candle breaks the lower Bollinger Band. It doesn't have to close outside the Bollinger Bands, just has to have a high or low outside. I'm going to be entering then at the high or low of that trigger candle. So if the trigger candle has broken the lower Bollinger Band, I'll be entering at the high plus 1 pip. And if the trigger candle broke the upper Bollinger Band, then I'll be entering at the low minus 1 pip. The stop loss is then at the opposite side of that trigger candle, also plus or minus 1 pip. And the take profit is set at a 1-to-1 ratio with the stop loss. Orders are cancelled when there is a second trigger candle. Now, this was not entirely clear in the strategy whether the intent was to cancel as soon as a new candle forms or only if the new candle is a trigger candle, because the only example shown is also a trigger candle. So I've chosen to only cancel orders when there is a second trigger candle, but you may want to try something different. I'm testing 6 different symbols: the Euro USD, Pound USD, Aussie US, Aussie Kiwi, and I'm using the Aussie Kiwi because that was the example given in the original strategy, and then Euro Pound and Pound Aussie. I'm trading all of these with 2% of risk, so 0.02 fraction of the current equity when the trade is placed. So let's go straight into it. I won't take too long over running these tests, and then we'll come back and see the results. Now I have the strategy tester set up here ready to run the Bollinger Bounce. If I go to the inputs, I'm using the fast MA as 50 period exponential on the closing price. The slow MA is 100 period exponential on closing price. I'm not using the trend angle, as I explained, because I find that when I do use that, I get very few trades. So it might be a useful tool if you want to reduce total number of trades and make sure they're better, but you get so few trades. In many of my tests, I got no results at all. The Bollinger period 20 and Bollinger deviations of 2, so those are the defaults for a Bollinger, and the applied price for Bollinger is close price. The entry gap, so this is the number of points away from the trigger candle, and that's 10 points or 1 pip, and the stop loss gap, again, that's number of points away from the high or low of the trigger candle, that's also 10 points. And the take profit multiplier 1, so I've got a 1-to-1 take profit stop loss ratio. My order size in risk fraction 0.02, so I'm risking 2% of equity on each trade. Cancel only on new trigger. I said that there was a little bit of ambiguity as to whether a new candle should cancel an existing order or only if that new candle is a trigger. I've decided to run this test only if it is a new trigger candle. And then the magic number and a trade comment. So let's run this now on Euro USD, Pound USD, Aussie US, Aussie Kiwi, and I'm choosing Aussie Kiwi here because that was actually used in the original video to test the strategy, Euro Pound and Pound Aussie. Now these results are not great, but they generally are better than many of the other strategies that I've seen here. You can see that Euro USD has a loss, but Pound USD has quite a significant gain over the same period, all the same settings. And Aussie USD also has a gain along with Pound Aussie, but that's quite a small profit. Altogether, I've got a mixed bag of 3 losses and 3 wins. And if I added the values of those together, I would have lost overall. But there are some options that I didn't necessarily use and didn't perhaps set exactly the way they should have been set based on the information that I had for the strategy. So you may want to change these around for yourself. Some of the things you might want to consider changing would be the width of the Bollinger Bands, the period for the Bollinger Band, perhaps the take profit stop loss ratio, and as the original strategy suggests, you may want to manually intervene at times if you feel that the trend is going to move against you. You might want to manually close trades, or you might want to manually adjust the stop loss take profit ratios on individual trades. If you want to see the complete results, the output result that's produced by MetaTrader, I'm posting all of those on the website, and there'll be a link in the description to the website article, which will then have links to each of the results for these 6 tests. I have a follow-up video coming where I will show how I wrote the code for this. Just remember that the code that I'm going to be showing is only sufficient to run these tests. It's not necessarily fully robust code with all of the error handling that you might want in a true expert advisor, but it will get you started if you want to copy that, and that will be coming up in the next video. So until next time, thank you for watching.